Hi, it's Dr. Ryan Reish. We're continuing our course on diabetes with a lesson on as an introduction to insulin. Now, insulin, as you recall, is a mainstay of treatment for diabetes, absolutely key and critical in type 1 diabetes and a mainstay of therapy for type 2 diabetes as well. As you recall, insulin is produced by the human pancreas, and it's actually a peptide, a chain of amino acids. There's a diagram over here, chain of amino acids that's produced in the pancreas. Actually, it's produced as initially as a molecule called proinsulin that is much longer peptide than what insulin actually is, but that length is necessary for the peptide to fold into the form that becomes active insulin and allows it to interact with its receptors. So as it's being made, this longer portion of the peptide is actually cleaved off, and we can pluck out an insulin molecule there, which then is secreted by the pancreas, travels through the circulation, and then ends up at the target organs. And there's receptors on the cells of those target organs that, when bound with the insulin, uh, causes a cellular cascade, resulting in, among other things, the activation of a glucose transporter that moves glucose from outside the cell to inside the cell. Now, insulin's also important in protein metabolism, lipids, growth in general. So, how do we get this to be used as a medicine? Like, again, with type 1 diabetes, the patient can't create their own insulin, so we need to give it to them. Classically, we've gotten this from other large mammals like cows and pigs. Modern insulins, however, are usually made using recombinant technologies that harness the cellular machinery of yeast to produce our insulins. Now, once produced, the insulin's collected, and then it needs a delivery mechanism. It can be put into vials, drawn up with a syringe, and delivered to the subcutaneous tissue, or there's devices like these pens. Now, these pens contain a vial of insulin and a mechanism at the top where you can dial in the dose you want. You remove the cap, you can pull off the needle, or put on a needle rather, and then you press the button, which will then depress this plunger that will allow the dialed in dose of insulin to be administered. Now, once in the subcutaneous tissues, this insulin monomer that was cleaved from the proinsulin actually congregates and forms this insulin hexamer. Now, this is important because the insulin, and then again, this insulin monomer is of similar structure to the regular human insulin. It forms a hexamer, and the hexamer then needs to be broken apart again to smaller bits that can be absorbed into the circulation and travel to the target organs. Now, we can use this propensity for the insulin monomer to form hexamers to manipulate the insulin molecule into forms that are better suited for use in that basal bolus regimen that we described in one of the other lessons. Again, our pancreas secretes insulin all the time, and then in response to meals, will secrete more insulin around those times to deal with the glucose and carbohydrate load that we get. Well, we want to try to mimic that, and we can't do that with just insulin, regular insulin alone, administered in multiple shots per day. So what they've figured out how to do is actually replace one of these amino acids with an aspartate. And in this case, it decreases the likelihood that this monomer will form a hexamer. And by doing that, it leaves it in smaller pieces that's absorbed more rapidly. Now, this is insulin aspart. Now, another substitution they can make, or actually an addition, is they can tack on a myristic acid to the end of the insulin molecule, and by doing that, it makes it more likely to form a hexamer. And when it's more likely to form a hexamer and stay in a hexamer, it makes it absorb more slowly, giving you that nice basal insulin. It also allows it to bind to albumin better, but allowing it to give you that basal rate. Now, in doing that, you can then have a long-acting insulin in one injection a day, give you a basal rate, and then have multiple mealtime injections with this aspart that allows much more flexibility and a much more physiologic representation of glucose management, as we've discussed in our previous lessons. Now, we'll also see you in future lessons.